I was working over 100 hours a week. And that was the first time in my marriage where we almost got divorced. And there's been several of those. And by the way, all your listeners, if they're A-type people and they're out there, cranking and they've been in the military, which kind of snips some wires, a little bit, they've all had these conversations with their spouse about, work-life balance. Yep. By the way, this is the core central theme of my life. I had given up on the idea that you can have a wonderful marriage. You can win at work and win at home. I had totally given up on that idea.
Welcome to the In the Arena podcast. My name is Jared Miguez, a co-host on this podcast that brings you the inspiring stories of our clients who are leaders and innovators across different industries in Southeast Louisiana. They are visionary entrepreneurs, savvy real estate professionals, media creators, military business owners, and community champions. And we are going to showcase the remarkable achievements and share their personal stories. Tune in for insightful conversations, valuable lessons, and motivational stories that are going to reveal their secrets to success and offer you insights to help you on your own path. Welcome to In the Arena podcast.
All right, let's get into it. This is Dominic Luke. I got Jared Miguez here, Pipeline Podcast, and we're excited to have Phil Nicaud in the studio. So Phil, former Marine, right? From 93 to 97. Did some pretty interesting things in the Marines. After you got out, you started some businesses, sold some businesses, and now you're the CEO of Legendary Leadership and Consulting Services here in the greater New Orleans area. So welcome to the podcast. Welcome to the space, man. Glad to have you here.
Yeah. Thank you, Dom. Thank you, Jared. Great to be with you and your listeners.
Yeah.
So, we've talked a lot about this, and, I respect so much about the things that both of you guys did for our country. And the more I've gotten to know both of you, I want everybody to hear the things that y'all have to say, because it can affect people personally and professionally, because y'all both made an impact on me, both personally and professionally. So, but in order for us to get to that point, and the purpose of what we're doing here is first to honor the service that the time you spent in the military, and kind of lay the foundation for who you are as a person. And so we call this the pipeline because we talk about your experience in the military and then the transition out to business. So let's start with, what kind of got you motivated to get into the military, and we can get into your military experience.
Well, I guess, for me personally, I've had some time to think about this over the years, and I think that really I would put it into one thing, and that is that I didn't really have a vision for my life. My best friend, who, by the way, I just spoke at his funeral, my best friend of 40 years just passed away of a heart attack, Dr. Adam Perry, and we were just so close. And literally this past Saturday, I spoke at his funeral. Wow. And it brought me back to those days. So it's interesting you're asking me that question. But Adam went on. I got scholarships to play football, and powerlifting in college. He got a scholarship to LSU. Moved on very quick. And then for me, when he left, it kind of left a little void. I lost my true north, my best bud, and I was like, and my parents had been divorced, and, so it was just like, what's the vision for your life? And I really didn't have one. And so we had a guy that came back from the Marine Corps. He had USMC on his T-shirt, came back, worked out with us. And my coach, Al Smith, who at the time, and if you're from Covington, Louisiana, you know this guy, Al Smith. And he was like, you see that, Nicaud? You ought to join the Marine Corps. Clean your ass up. That's what he said to me.
Yeah.
And I was like, huh. And I look at that, and immediately I identified with the Marines.
Yeah.
The recruiter just happened to be, snooping around campus.
as they always do.
As they do, right? We always have those funny stories.
Yeah.
And so anyway, I started talking to that guy about, boot camp and infantry school and what he was doing. And he was like, man, look, I've seen the world already and this, that, and the other. And so that was it. I had that vision became my vision, and that's why I joined.
Yeah. So did you know what you wanted to do when you got in there? I mean, you wanted to be in the Marines, but did you know what you wanted to do, what you wanted your job to be, or did you kind of get in and figure it out?
Yeah, so for me, originally, when I started to look with the recruiter and talk about what I could do in the Marine Corps, I wanted to do the baddest things you could do in the military. So, I was young, no real vision. I was like, I'm going to just give myself to something that's like bigger than me. And, at the time, what I said is if I score X or higher on the ACT, then I'm going to go play ball in college. If I score X or lower, then I'm going to join the Marine Corps. Well, my mama said, you got other gifts, Phil. So I scored low on the ACT. Truth is, I showed up, half lit. And then I went and scored low, went straight to the MEP Center, swore in. And I just told the recruiter, I was like, put me in the infantry. They were like, we love you.
Yeah.
You know, and so
Just who we're looking for.
I was like, I want to go see the world, do everything, kill bad guys. That's what I want to do.
Yeah.
And so anyway, he put me in the infantry, but he said, hey, they got this cool designation that you could do. It's called security forces. And I said, okay, well, that's interesting. And so I went in as an infantryman. At the time, you just go in infantry, and then you select your different specialty in that MOS.
Do you have to go to boot camp first?
You go to boot camp first. So I went straight to California for boot camp.
You did California, yeah.
Back to infantry school. And when I was there, they said, you look like a big old hoss. And they made me a machine gunner. And so on all the humps, I carried the Marduk's 50 caliber, you know, just a bolt and receiver, 75 pounds on top of your 65-pound pack. So we're out there humping that through all the hills in California. And so I was an infantry machine gunner, got to security force school in Chesapeake, Virginia. So go from California to the East Coast to Chesapeake, Virginia, go through security force school. And at the time, they were consolidating Fast PAC, Pacific, and Fast LANT, which is Fleet Anti-Terrorism Security Team. And so they were building that company of Marines. And so there was an indoctrination test. We took the indoc, passed, and there was a whole cluster of us in security forces that went into FAST, and we were stationed in Norfolk, Virginia. At the time, it was on Naval Air Station Norfolk, and that was 1993. I checked in around that time, toward the end of 93, 94, to my unit at FAST. And that's where I spent my whole time. Typically, you would do, coming straight from infantry school and security forces, you go straight into FAST, and then you go back out to the fleet 2 years later. But I kept getting deployed over and over and over again. And so when it was time for me to punch back to the fleet, I was deployed. So I stayed my entire time in FAST, which is very unusual.
Yeah.
And then the fleet guys, they would do a couple, 3 years in the fleet and go do FAST as a B billet.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of how.
So Dom always talks about that training and all the classes you took between basic and actually being able to do your job in the military as your pipeline. So in your pipeline, all the schools that you had to take, how did you have to take a bunch, and which one was the most challenging for you?
Well, so in the Marine Corps, it's a little bit different. So we go straight to infantry school, and you go to all your school right there up front in the infantry.
Gotcha.
We went straight from there because it was in my contract to security forces. Then once I got to FAST, that's when you get opened up to all kind of schools. So when you're in your unit, as long as you're not deployed, if you're back in the rear training, that's when you get your billets for your schools. And so in FAST, we did everything from jump, scuba, scout, sniper, designated marksman. We did a ton of that. We're literally like miles away, just a few miles away from Dam Neck. So we trained with the SEALs out there. Dev Group did fast roping, rappel, spy rigging. You know, they had a small arms range. They had a machine gun range, and then some DMs were trained out there, designated marksmen. My favorite school in the Marine Corps, and by the way, if any of your listeners have been to this school, they would agree, is called BSR. Back in the 90s, they had a school called BSR, Bill Scott Raceways, and it was evasive driving.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And man, we used to take these 1980, like 88 Chevy Caprices, bring them up to like literally 140 miles an hour on the straightaway. It was on a racetrack. We're trained by professional race car drivers.
That's awesome.
And we would, ram cars. It was basically how to get out of a hot spot.
Defensive
with
driving.
principles.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So we do reverse 180s, forward 180s. I mean, half the Marines were like flying off in the woods. And that was the most fun school I have ever been to in the Marine Corps.
Nice.
That's cool.
Nice, yeah. So thinking about your career, right? 4-year stint, you went and did some pretty cool things, got to go and train some pretty cool places and deploy. What part of your career was the most enjoyable for you? And then what is some of those big lessons that you've taken away? I mean, it's a short window of time that you spent there, but you also experienced some pretty interesting things in that window, right?
Yeah.
And so you mind talking a little bit about that?
Sure, yeah. So, the deployments are all different.
Yeah.
Some of these deployments are hot. Some of them are just boring,
Yeah.
So we did a deployment in Hawaii, and you would think that that's paradise. It's great. It was awful.
Yeah,
it
it's
was
not.
force protection, full combat load, shift work.
Yeah.
It was awful.
Yeah.
I mean, just, we got to go to Waikiki Beach a couple times, but most of the time, and by the way, that's the best fish I ever had in my life.
Yeah.
Okay, we had a couple times where we cooked
It's
out, and I
good
was
food,
like,
yeah.
I could
it's
stay
30
here.
years later, I still remember it.
Yeah, right.
But it was awful work.
Yeah.
Now when I went to Bahrain, that was a little different. Some of our liberty, we got to go out in town and go across the causeway to Dhahran and went to the gold souk, and I brought my family some gold and stuff like that. Actually, my wife and I, that was 1996, 1997, early parts, we were dating. I just met my wife 2 weeks prior to that. And we were
Over
writing
there?
letters. Oh, yeah. I met her in
here.
Virginia Beach.
Oh, gotcha.
And so we were dating, and we were writing letters to each other, and I bought her some gold, all the little, because it's real cheap over there. You know? And so
On that Marine Corps income, right?
oh yeah, we had hazardous duty pay, all kind of. We would take a ride in an old patrol boat with like some rusty M60 on the back, and that's how we collect our hazardous duty pay because we'd hit the Gulf there.
Yeah. Hit the golf, turn around, come right back. Got my tax-free money for the month.
Cool memory. Back then, Bahrain had a sheikh, kind of like a king. He was a king. They call him a sheikh. And this guy, we went to Sheikh's Beach. Somehow we got to go to the beach over there. And he came out when we got on the property, little bitty guy, and he goes, "Welcome to my beach." And I was like, "Man, thank you, Sheikh."
Thank you.
And he says, "You can go anywhere you want." And they had all the British airline stewardesses all sitting there. "We'll go over there." Yes, I know you
Good choice. Good choice.
That's awesome. That's
Fun.
awesome.
So, all right, let's speed up a little. Let's speed up the timeline, right? So we went from 93 to 97. We were in the military. We had some unique experiences. Got to go through some cool, driving schools and sniper schools and designated marksman schools, all of which are really fun, right? And so then you started looking at, all right, I'm now dating somebody. I'm looking at potentially getting out of the military. How did you take what you knew in the Marine Corps and say, now I want to translate that into business. Now I want to move into the private sector and get out of what I've been doing for the past 4 years and go do something else. How did you make that jump? But then how were you able to take your lessons from your Marine Corps experience and apply that to business?
Sure.
And as you get into that, I want also to know the transition. Like, how was that for you? Like, did it take you a second to be able to piece what you did there to business and figure out how you were going to do that?
Yeah, before you even asked that question, I was going to go there, Jared. And Dom, I appreciate the question. And for your listeners, since a lot of these are veterans, I want to tell you that I didn't. I went into a mini depression.
Yeah.
I mean, it was just like,
it's hard.
you go from knowing exactly what to wear, exactly how to talk, exactly who to talk to, when, all this, what to do, how to do things. I mean, you knew everything precision.
Yes.
And you go into a world called the civilian world, which is just totally gooey.
Yeah.
I mean, everything's just what you want, when you want. There is no, I mean, it's all self-governance.
Yes.
Where you're completely governed in the
Yes.
in the Marine Corps, pretty much.
Yeah.
Especially, in the unit that I was in. So the reality is that I went back to the seafood business. My dad, we grew up in the seafood business down here in South Louisiana. Went back, worked for him for a year, and then it was my wife, who's from Virginia Beach, just said, "We need to go open a restaurant." And I was like, "Really?" I was like, "That's cool." I mean, that's like always been a dream of mine, that's cool. And she's like, "Oh yeah, let's go back to Virginia Beach and do that." So I kid you not, we fly to Virginia Beach, rent a hotel room for 2 weeks. I'm not kidding. We had a son, Luke. We found the place, signed the lease, moved back, rented a townhouse, and opened a restaurant. I had paid off my 1997 Isuzu Rodeo.
Wow.
Who remembers the 1997 Isuzu
Heard of
Rodeo? Was I paid that off, and I went to her friend at the bank, and I said, "Rhea, how much would you give me for this paid off car?" She said, "I'll loan you $16,000. I took that $16,000 and started Naturally New Orleans Seafood Restaurant in Virginia Beach, Virginia, 1998. And we started off doing that. It was a turnkey operation, and so we just went in, had to buy inventory, and start cooking. And so
Wow.
that's what we did.
Wow.
I don't think I knew that part of your story.
That's pretty
incredible. How long
interesting.
did that business exist?
We did that for 2 years. It was a hit because Cajun was hot back then, pun intended. I mean, it was like it hit the scene big time in the early '90s, and we had authentic food. So we made po' boys, jambalaya, gumbo, etouffee, red beans and rice. I named some dishes after my kids, St. Luke's catfish, and I made like a fried catfish with crawfish cream sauce. And so we had authentic food in a place where they didn't have that. But a lot of Louisiana residents settled there, Mississippi, Gulf Coast, from the military.
Yeah.
They stayed, and so we had a big local following and a huge tourist following because we were in a resort hotel. So as a result, that we did well, but that was when I first, I was working over 100 hours a week. And that was the first time in my marriage where we almost got divorced. And there's been several of those. And by the way, all your listeners, if they're A-type people and they're out there, cranking and they've been in the military, which kind of snips some wires, a little bit, they've all had these conversations with their spouse about, work-life balance.
Yep.
By the way, this is the core central theme of my life. I had given up on the idea that you can have a wonderful marriage. You can win at work and win at home. I had totally given up on that idea.
And so you were focusing more on work.
Oh my gosh, yeah. I mean, look, that plagued me for 15 years.
Yeah.
The first 15 years of our marriage.
Yeah.
We've been married 27 years this year. It wasn't until I met a guy named Daniel Harkavy in Oregon on the West Coast. I went to the Building Champions Experience, and he put me through something called life planning. And that process radically changed my life.
And that's when you shifted into what it is you do now.
About 2 years after that, so I started getting coached by Building Champions, and my first coach was James Allison, one of the best communicators still to this day that I've ever heard. The guy was born with a cleft palate, internal, couldn't speak, was made fun of his whole life, and ended up getting a master's in communications, one of the best speakers I've ever heard in my life to this point. And he was my very first coach. He was a college basketball player, great guy, and so anyway, he worked for Building Champions. Daniel Harkavy became a mentor, is still a mentor to this day, very dear friend. And he's the author of the book, Living Forward, and many other, Becoming a Coaching Leader. He's the founder of Building Champions, very dear friend of mine.
So I think it's important to note that, your legendary leadership consulting services, you're a published author, you have your own book, you have your the character code here. We have the 5Gs journal here, right? And basically you guide people through a process and help them figure out what their life's plan is, right? And so essentially you've taken your military experience, recognized what you had to go through to transition out of your military experience, got into some jobs, started working, owning your own businesses until you fell into your passion of actually helping people.
That's right. It made such a big difference in my life, and that's not me saying that. That's Elisa Nicaud saying that. So what happened is I go to this conference, and there's 500 CEOs in there, and in the end of the day, Daniel's standing up there. This is on day 2. And he had dinner with me that night, okay? And so a friend of mine had recommended, and he knew him. And so he said, hey, you have dinner plans? I said, no. So we had dinner that night. The next day, he's up on stage, and he said, look, some of you have a relationship that has some heat on it. And immediately I thought about my dad. My dad was a great man, but he had a strained relationship with a lot of people, and I was one of them. And so Daniel said, look, I know that you have this relationship. It's not where you want it to be, but you could do something about it. And in my mind, not with my mouth, I said, yeah, but it takes 2 to tango. And him with his mouth in front of 500 people said, I know it takes 2 to tango.
Jeez.
And I was just like, man, got my attention. And he said, but if you follow the process, if you write down what you want, you write down why that's important to motivate you when you don't feel like doing what you want. Then you write down what you're willing to do daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, and annually. All the projects necessary to get that, what you want, and you do it.
It'll happen.
If you get it, you win the Super Bowl. If you don't, you live life with no regret. When I heard that, I bought it, hook, line, and sinker. And so I began to do this in my life. And it led to a reconciliation with my dad. For the last 2 years of his life, we were best friends in every way.
Yeah.
I ended up finding him when he passed away. And I talked to you guys about that at a conference that you came to when we all gathered and met years ago.
Yeah.
And so it was very special. It made a big impact on me. My wife said, did you do the plan? I was like, no, it's a new process. she said, I was like, there's like 500 CEOs there. It's like awkward,
Yeah.
And she goes, you went all the way out to the West Coast and spent $7,000 and all this. And I was like, honey, it's not easy. And she goes, does it have instructions? I said, yeah, but I don't read instructions. She goes, I'm taking you to the Ritz-Carlton. And so my wife's a little pepper, so she takes me to the Ritz-Carlton, leads me through the creation of my life plan. After I come back from the conference, it made such a profound impact on me. 3 months later, we're back at the Ritz. I'm leading her through the creation of hers. That's how Legendary really in concept was born. So we started our business 2 years later, had 70 clients all over America, started doing these one-on-one life plan retreats, and that's really how Legendary was born. We had some organizational consulting contracts. But
Yeah.
that's it.
Yeah, that's and I've been on a life plan experience too, and the obituary exercise and the super impactful. So, in going back, like your experience in the military, like how much of that is part of this? Is there any of those lessons that you learned a part of this, or is this something that kind of came from reality of you have these experiences which got you to the crossroads in life where it was like, okay, this is the thing that's going to allow me to be the Phil Nicaud that God's made me to be.
Yeah. Well, all these people that from the military that are veterans that speak on these podcasts and speak at conferences, they say all these things to audiences that don't know any better. But your audience is a bunch of veterans. So let me just tell you this. The military, particularly in the combat military, groups, right? It's a great fraternity, but it's also dark. I mean, it's just you experience loneliness. It's just dark. It's not the best leaders I've ever met. Marine Corps, the worst leaders I've ever met. Marine Corps. The military has some of the best and some of the worst. It's really a picture of society, but it's the full breadth of all walks of life, all coming together, being forced to do things one way.
Yeah.
Okay, and so this produces all kinds of things in people. And so for me, I think that I've learned some amazing leadership lessons and got the privilege of serving with amazing leaders. And then also we had some awful leaders. I was one of them, in my journey. I mean, you have to learn this. Are there people that are natural born leaders? Yes, I think so. But influence is an art. Yeah. And having power over somebody is a whole lot different than having power with them. Power with is earned.
Yeah.
I followed many leaders because I had to in the Marine Corps. But it was a privilege to work with leaders that I wanted to. Yeah. You see what I'm saying? They earned the right to lead us. Yeah. And we had great respect for them and for really some of the skins on the wall that they had, how they led. And they developed, they had a care about, they cared about you as a person, not just as
Which
as
is funny you say that, because we had a guy, he was a Navy SEAL, and he kind of went on a journey of figuring out what leadership was. It's like one of the main memories he had, and one of his main objectives while he was there is to figure out what is leadership. And he came to the conclusion at the end, and I won't spoil it for everybody else, the whole transition, how he came to this, but he said leadership equals love. And it's like caring for the people selflessly that you're leading is what real leadership actually means and requires.
Great.
Yeah.
Yeah, a great teacher, mentor of mine, Dr. Paul Hersey, who wrote Situational Leadership with Ken Blanchard. Okay, Dr. Paul Hersey says that the two power pillars are it's personal power and position power. And there's 7 power pillars underneath those two. And so one of those is referent power. It's an old English word. It's when we perceive that the way a person lives is a way that we aspire to live. And therefore we give them respect in how they behave and live in front of others and not in front of others. This referent power is a real power pillar. You'll hear people say it's like, that dude's good in front of you and he's good behind your back. That girl, the way she lives outside the company is impeccable. It's amazing. What are they talking about? They're talking about character. And that's such a unique word. Character is such a relevant word in today's society. And a business person never really defined that. And I know we're not getting into the book right now, but that's why I wrote the book, The Character Code, and defined it. I defined character from a business person's perspective.
Yeah.
And so in there were some high character leaders in the Marine Corps. And then, of course, in athletics. I had the privilege, and some of your leaders won't know who this is, of playing football for the late Jack Salter. Coach Jack Salter is an icon out here in the South and in the coaching world. Wasn't the winningest coach in America, but boy, he was he fathered the most sons and daughters. I mean, this guy was just a mountain of a man. And so I had the privilege of playing for him. And so that was a great person that kind of formed and shaped my moral code, my character code.
You played badminton in high school, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So how do you define leadership? I mean, your company's named Leader,
Sure.
legendary leaders, legendary leadership. So how do you define leadership?
Well, I guess, I've heard it defined as influence. Paul Hersey says any attempt to influence. And so I've heard John Maxwell say that everything rises and falls on leadership. And I say leaders rise and fall on governance. I'll tell you what I mean by that. What are the governing authorities that you've placed over your life? I didn't say who, I say what. And in the book, The Character Code, I give people the opportunity to discover some research that I've done in 4 years. And it makes plain how leaders sit in their leadership position for 25 years or more with no ethical, moral, or financial failures that kick them off the seat. I'll talk about why I went into that journey in the book. There's 2 parts, discovery and design. And in there, you create your own unique character code. This is your government structure. The first form of governance is self-governance, then family governance, then civil governance, then church governance, and so on and so forth. We're in the military, so there's military governance.
Yeah.
If you're not a business owner, then there's business governance, there's corporate governance, societal governance, right? Civil. And so what's the government structure that you placed over your life? What's governing your life? And if you don't have it as a business owner in America, you really just have the law and the IRS.
Yeah.
And so really, what is it? Because people are always going to want to know whether you succeed or fail. What is the secret sauce? What's behind that? They're wanting to know, what's that governance structure? And in the governance structure, that's where you find your character code.
But here's a question though. For somebody that is living a 4, 6, 10, 15, 20-year military career, right? And all they have ever known is military whatever. How do they find that?
Yeah. I mean, here's how I define it in the book. And I forget the page. I think it's 32. Don't quote me on that. But in there, I define character. Again, very ooey gooey, concept outside of the religious world.
Sure.
But in the business world, that's how I define it. All of us are born with this innate voice of right and wrong. And this is true. It doesn't mean selfish and not selfish. Kids are naturally selfish, but they don't naturally want to murder. There's a voice of right and wrong. That voice of right and wrong is shaped by the family you grow up in, the environment you grow up in, the family you don't grow up in, your friends, your education. In today's world, the media, the military, all these things shape that voice of right and wrong, and they form it into what's called a moral code. This moral code casts an image of somebody that you aspire to be like. And that produces your thoughts, your words, your actions. And your actual thoughts, words, and actions reveal to the world whether you're living integrity with that voice of right and wrong. That produces either compromise or it's alignment.
Right.
And from there, you either have great fulfillment or you have great regret. If you consistently over a long period of time, because that's what character is, it's speech and behavior over a long period of time, observed over a long period of time. It's something that you can't see. You know when somebody doesn't have it. You can't see it, right? Then if you demonstrate that integrity over a long period of time, then what happens is it produces confident, authentic, fearless leadership. You can walk in any room confident, authentic, and fearless. Regardless of what anybody says or judges you, you are true to yourself. In the book, I don't tell people what that should be. I have no right to do that. I call out duplicitous living. Don't say one thing behind the closed doors and be somebody else. I call out duplicitous living. Mike Tyson and I don't have the same, may not have the same character code. I don't know. I don't think we do. But you know what? He's completely confident, authentic, and fearless in who he is.
Yeah.
I love that about the guy.
Yeah.
At least he's not going back and forth. He's not double-minded.
Right.
What I say is that in the backdrop of the great transfer, the greatest transfer of wealth and leadership the world's ever seen at one time in the next 10 years. So in the backdrop of that, integrity and character will become the chief virtue that people aspire to have. And so if you aspire to possess that, then you have to be higher than the national, societal, national, industry, business, or even family code. That water table, you got to be at a higher level. The people that I interviewed for this book, they all had a higher character code than the people they led. Their standard was much higher. What does that mean? I'm not trusting my money to be managed to somebody that has awful character that's misaligned with mine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that helps the
No,
veterans.
it does.
phenomenal.
Well, it's just what I'm hearing you say is when people are looking at transitioning out of the military or trying to even if you're not in the military and you're just trying to figure out your path, you have to figure out something that sits true to who you are and aligns with your own character code, right? And it's the value that you're bringing to the organization, the business, the world, whatever it might be. Am I following you on that?
That's right. Yeah. And at the end of the day, what I'm saying to your listeners is I didn't have the magic bullet. It was a 20-year, it's been a 20-year journey.
Yeah.
So, I don't have a straight pipeline in my career
Sure,
from the
nobody
military
does.
to right now. Mine's been more of a jagged edge pipeline with PVC couplings, all kind of stuff. I mean, it really has been. The reality is when I first left the military, I did feel like I went into a little depression. It was like, it was a year of just like getting used to a world that didn't make sense.
Yeah.
And you know what I'm talking about.
exactly
Your
what
listeners
you're
know exactly what I'm talking about. So, I had to get right. Some of the guys that are coming back from war, okay, that has seen been under tremendous duress, either through fear of death or inflicting death.
Right.
Pain, not, all kinds of trauma. By the way, whether you killed or you didn't, whether you were ready to or not, it doesn't matter. That's not just event trauma, that's accumulated trauma. Every single one of your veterans has been through some level of accumulated trauma that could really hurt them up here in their psyche, in their mental emotional state. That needs to be attended to. That needs to be taken care of. You need to have somebody that goes and takes a snapshot and a Polaroid of where you are and establish a baseline, and then you can always work from that baseline.
Yeah.
There's no shame in that. Let me just demystify that right now.
Yeah, absolutely.
And condemn that.
That's
there
why
is
we're
no
here.
shame in that. My
Absolutely.
God. Have your folks all go. I mean, everybody listening, go get some level of evaluation done. I do. I have for about 15 years. I mean, that's been one of the big helps in my life.
Yeah.
And then I would say, you really need to understand, in order for the character code, you need to understand what's your voice of right and wrong. Mine is crystal clear, okay? I mean, at 30 years old, my entire life changed. My wife and I were getting divorced. We hated each other. We had 2 kids, and she was pregnant with number 3. And so my life was a mess.
Mm-hmm.
And Jesus Christ stepped in, and my whole life changed. I don't know how your listeners feel about that. That's my story.
Yeah, no,
Sure, yeah.
And so I would say, number one, there's two invisible parts of who you are. There's your spirit, and there's your soul. And the reality is that you are a spirit. You have a soul, which is your mind, your will, and your emotions, and you live in a body, which is made up of your 5 senses and your flesh. And so you got to take care of all 3 of those and really know who you are in all 3 of those.
Yeah.
And the truest part of who you are is your spirit.
Yeah.
In your soul, this is what's really making a lot of decisions, And then the lowest form of living is sensual living.
Right.
Living only according to whatever you feel like, whenever you feel like it. If that were the case, I've been divorced 5 times and have a pile of kids in 3 different countries. I mean, whatever you feel like, whenever you feel like it. It's just, that's such an immature thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's inside out living instead of outside in living.
Yeah.
And that really is the mark of a character-based leader. That is the mark of a true leader that somebody really aspires to follow, and that would give them the right to lead them. They feel safe in that place.
You know what's interesting too is here you are talking about how you need to connect with your own self, your spirit, your soul, and make those decisions. Yet the military doesn't allow you to do that, right? When you're in the military, you're going off of a plan. Here it is. That's what you have to do. I don't care what your intuition or what your gut or what you're feeling, right? This is the plan. And so as people are getting out of the military, they start battling that. I know I was. I had this plan. I didn't sit well with this plan, but I had to do it anyway because this is what my boss told me to do. But my intuition, my gut, my spirit, my soul was saying, no, this is what you should be doing and feeling, right? And so trying to figure out how to manage that. Now that I got out of the military, I was finding myself questioning myself like, okay, well, my gut and my spirit are saying this, but I know that in the military I was doing it this way and I should be doing it this way. And so I found this collision of really insecurity around myself. Like, well, fuck, how do I apply what I'm feeling, but know that there's a lot of confusion that happens when you're get out of the military, you're transitioning, you're trying to move into business, right? And so as I'm hearing you speak, it's coming through more and more like your gut, your intuition, your spirit, your soul, the thing that you're talking about, that's what's going to lead you to be a good leader into the organization or into the company or into the future, whatever it is, right?
All those skills and the disciplines and the consistency and all that stuff, if you would have always been able to run with your gut or your spirit or your heart and not had somebody say, no, we're going to build these disciplines first.
Absolutely.
Before you get that.
Yeah.
Like a lot of people nowadays they live their entire life without having any discipline or any control or anybody who puts any structure in their lives. And they get into business and they feel they can do whatever they want when you've got to have some consistency and processes in order to grow or make an impact.
Yeah.
And so like for me, it's important for the people that are currently in the military to know that if you find what you're passionate about, or you do have some sort of moral code that aligns with somebody that you want to go work for, that the disciplines and the skills you have learned are valued in business. Like business owners want to have somebody who knows how to solve a problem and follow a plan and be disciplined and show up to work on time and do what they're supposed to.
Right.
Like that is huge. And, it takes a long time to find that. And if you can have easier access of finding it by showing on a resume that I've 4 years of my life, I got to go do all these schools and trainings, and I did this in the military. I was a PJ, I was a Marine. Like that is valuable for business owners.
I agree.
Those gifts are not, those traits are not there from just coming out of college. You haven't gone through what you went through.
Right.
Yeah, so I would say to your listeners this, and this is an important part. So absolutely 100%, Dom, I relate to what you're talking about. I confess to going into a little mini depression.
Yeah.
There's lots of confusion on a very clear path for a long period of time, and then total confusion and of what should be, shouldn't be, all that kind of thing. But I would say this, don't despise the service that you've made. Like Jared's saying, harness that thing and let it be a confluence, who you were before, who you became in the military, but just focus it in the right direction. And you can do that by understanding your true moral code, your voice of right and wrong. Who are you in your spirit? For me, my whole life, there was just a major, hole. I just tried to stuff it with all kind of other stuff, right? And so it wasn't until I met the person of Christ, that's what changed my life. Here's the deal. My marriage was over. I'm not exaggerating. Mm-hmm. It was over. And so, I was ready to what we call pop smoke. That's what we call, you pop smoke and your helicopter's coming to get you and go home. So I was ready out of the marriage. And again, 2 kids, 1 on the way. And if it wasn't for that interruption in my life where I really started to discover who I was in my core and whose I was, and this hope of the next life, where you don't have to fear death, that there's eternity and what it looks like. That whole thing right there, that thing coming together, I never let go of who I was in the military. I'm proud of that service, and I'm proud of there's things that have shaped me in the military to make me a person that can reach people that other people couldn't. I'm relevant to some people that some people would say, I would never listen to this guy. Some people say, I would only listen to this person. You know what I'm saying? So what I guess I want your listeners to understand is this. Let it be a confluence. All this stuff that you've developed in the military, let it shape you into who you're becoming. And then I would just say, find your true north, who you are, get right in your soul, and you can do that. There's a whole profession that is on steroids post-COVID, okay? Pre-COVID, 12% of Americans confessed that they struggled with mental emotional issues. It's over 42%. Over 42% publicly declare this. This is epidemic. It's something, the lid's off.
Yeah. Go
get right in your soul. You know what I mean? And then I would say there are, for some people that have, gotten out and maybe they were med discharged or they've had some ailments and they got, hooked in a world of painkillers and things like that. There's a process that's a little bit more special for you. You get some special forces attention and you're going to have to go do some cell detoxing. You're going to have to get some community where you didn't think you'd have to have community before. There's a whole different process to all of you folks coming out that have dabbled in that. And by the way, that's not always your fault. We are not victims. We're victors. However, I want to let you know it's not always your fault. Mm-hmm. Now, as a result, it's not your fault, but it is your problem.
Right.
And it's a problem to solve and hit head on.
And it is your fault if you allow the problem to continue.
Yes. And that's going to come out in your kids' eyes. That's going to come out in your spouse's eyes.
Yep.
That's going to come out when you're in a restaurant and you blow up and everybody's looking at you like, who just set the bomb off?
Yep.
Mm-hmm. And so, it may not be your fault all the time, but it is your problem to solve. And it's something, and the way I solved it is I fell on my knees and I asked God, our creator, to help me with this.
Yeah.
And so
we got to wrap up in a few minutes, but I do want to get a few more questions before we do that. And so I like asking this question because I think it tells how you feel about your military career, but also, what advice you would give to a son or a daughter who came to you and said, "Hey, Dad, I think I'm going to do this." Like, what would you tell them if they asked you what you thought about them joining the military as well?
Well, thanks for asking that one. That's tough with our current climate, But I guess I'll go back and fall back on my uncle, Bob Ernst. My uncle served in the Vietnam War. His brother, too. His brother was a general when he got out. And I couldn't get in touch with my dad, and I couldn't get in touch with my mom. This is when I was swearing in at MEPS. So I called Uncle Bob, and he was the only one that picked up. This is back when we had landlines. I didn't have a cell phone. We had a pager, And Uncle Bob said, "Phil, it's an honorable thing to serve your country. Freedom is not free. Every generation has to pick up the flag, and they have to work for this freedom. They have to earn it. And so somebody's got to do it, son." And so he said, "I think it's honorable, and I think you just go for it." And so the recruiter called me, and I wasn't supposed to go in for 90 days. And he said, "Can you leave in 24 hours?" That's when I called Uncle Bob. That next day, I was in a pickup truck with my dad driving to New Orleans International Airport. First plane I ever got on in my life. Went straight out there to California, 17 years old, and 18. I just turned 18, and flew out there and stood on the yellow footprints, screaming, hollering, "Shave your head, keep you up all night," all that kind of stuff. But it snapped me into reality. The reality is my life changed. It was never the same after that. I was married just 3.5 years later. Started making babies just 6 months after that. 27 years we've been married. We got 5 kids, and life's never been the same. First portion of my marriage was hell. So just so your listeners know, I'm not giving any fluff.
Yeah.
It was a up and down battle constantly. But it was when really, again, Christ put my marriage back together for the rest of my life and all of eternity. Obviously, he gets the glory. But then he led me to different mentors and people like Daniel Harkavy. My Uncle Bob was one. Another guy named Bob Jinks, great dear friend of mine, mentor, my pastor and best friend, Steve Robinson, and many others, led me on this journey. So, I don't do life alone. And in the military, it's, don't quit. You can do it, anything on your own. I don't do it on my own. There is no Lone Ranger. By the way, Lone Ranger had Tonto.
Yeah. So let's tell us about legendary leadership, and let's get into that a little bit because I know I'm a part of the forum, and I want to go from there and tell people how they can get in touch with you and the impact you're making on business leaders' lives. Now, tell us about leadership, legendary leadership.
Well, Legendary Leadership Consultants is a leadership consulting firm. We're based in South Louisiana, just north of New Orleans. We do organizational consulting, executive coaching, speaking and training, and events. About 4 years ago, we started doing peer advisory. That has grown. We are now all over the Gulf South. So we're in Baton Rouge, the North Shore, New Orleans, and 30A. And so excited about that. That's where different founders and CEOs and executive leaders come together each month. We hire different speakers, fly them in or Zoom them in, and we talk about the topics that matter most to us. Faith, marriage, parenting, mental, emotional, physical fitness, leadership strategy, culture, heritage, how to build enterprise value, all the things that are important to us as business owners, not just professionally, but also in life, personally. And so this is what we do, and one of the examples of what we're doing is we have our coaches, our marriage coaches, Ivy and Benet Marsh. They'll be flying in from Northern Alabama, and they're going to come to a marriage conference on April 11th at the Southern Hotel in Covington. And so we're bringing all of our CEOs in for that, and then we'll have some other friends of the family that'll come in. Yeah. And we do programming like this to really invest in our community and also in our community of clients. We brought John Gordon in last year, the founder of Hobby Lobby, Mr. David Green, the year before that. We do golf trips with Jack Nicklaus. We have been up to the Museum of the Bible and done private tours there. We met John Gordon, Patrick Lencioni. We all flew out to Dallas for that. So there's great, not just relationships and community, but also, and content, but also these experiences as well.
Yeah. I think the idea that, getting together with a bunch of your friends to hear and be around these very impactful and influential people. I mean, you know, I get a lot of value out of Legendary, but that's one of the main reasons. It's just so good to be around other men and women who are all in the same boat and struggles in life, and then have these very successful, influential people come and speak to us in a private setting a lot of times.
Right.
Where it could be 10 of us in the room actually asking questions to people like John Gordon. It's been a really cool experience, and I know you're changing CEOs' lives. And I think the coolest part is, as you kind of get ingrained into the community, you start networking within the community, and then you start doing business within the community. And, like-minded people moving in the same direction, doing business together and growing together. It's been a cool experience. I mean, I know that my young firm would not be where it's at today if I did not have you and Legendary and the support that you have. I mean, there's just no doubt. I mean, you supported me making the decision. We talked a lot about it. People in the group have supported me. You've supported me. And so I'm thankful for the opportunity to be a part of Legendary myself. I know that I'm spread a million places and I don't get to give as much attention as I wish I could, but the value is 100% there. And if you're a CEO looking to either do the online forum or do the live forums, like, there's opportunity for you to grow.
For sure.
Yeah.
And Jared, you're one of our favorite members. He's the guy with the man bun.
Yeah.
We love him.
Am I the only guy with the man bun?
I think so,
Oh,
but that's
right.
okay.
Yeah.
That's
No,
all
that's
right.
a
We
good-
love the
that's a
man
good
bun.
thing for me.
That's your distinguishing differentiator. But we do send it, and it is true. We all do business together. I mean, I remember one time I was in a Bible study, and I was like, yeah, we probably should just not do business together. And one of the CEOs goes, I got 50 acres for sale out there. If somebody in this room wants to buy it, they're going to buy it. I was like, you know what?
You're
That's
right.
true. Who cares? Y'all can do whatever you want anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we do. Actually, it's better when we do.
Yeah.
And so I know a ton of the guys do business. Y'all are their attorney law firm, and you're mine.
Yeah.
So
We one of the
you.
coolest experience was the ice baths and seeing all those older guys get in an ice bath and see how much it locked them up whenever they got in there.
Steve Weatherford, a buddy of mine, came in from Texas, and he ran us through a full workout. And then after we hit the sauna, every single one of us, there were 3 of us in this little bitty sauna. And so we would have been sweating if there was no heat in there. And then we go hit the cold plunge, and then we get out. I mean, it was just crazy.
Yeah.
And so, but that was a great workout.
Yeah. It was a good experience.
Cool, man. Well, you want to close this out?
Yeah, let's wrap it up. So, we like to always give a shout out to a couple of people that supported us, the sponsors. But, I mean, before we do that, Legendary Leadership is a great company. Tell us how people can get in touch with you and Legendary.
Yep, you can go to legendaryleadershipconsultants.com and just go there. You'll have an info page. You can just connect with us there. You can email Pam at legendaryleadershipconsultants.com. I got the longest
Pam,
email
yeah.
in America.
Yeah.
But Ms. Pam Rodriguez is our director of operations. She's fantastic. We have all of our contact information in our book, the character code, and so you just go to our website.
And you can get this on Amazon, right?
You can get it on Amazon.
Yeah, highly recommend people do it. And then the experience, the L2X, Legendary Leadership Experience, right?
That's
It
right.
kind of plays off of the Legendary Leadership, and it's an experience you do once a year. And when is that going to be this year? Have you planned it yet?
Yep, that's in December. The date is on my calendar, and it's usually the second week of December.
Okay.
We usually do it at the Southern Hotel. This year, because of the size of the group, it's our 10-year anniversary. We may go back to the Ritz. We did it for 7 years at the Ritz-Carlton on Canal Street in New Orleans. We will not do it at the Four Seasons. We're going to probably do it at the Ritz. But that's all being decided right now and in contract negotiations.
Gotcha.
So,
But you go there, you'll build yourself a life plan.
Yeah.
You get to be around other like-minded individuals. You'll have some speakers. You'll get to go to the Ritz or the Southern, and then it's great vibing experience, relax, and really plan the next year. Yeah. And I've done it several times. It's worked it every time.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah. And so Phil, and then Arena Collective is one of the sponsors and provides the podcast. We're a law firm and title company. We're pretty much all I-12, which is from Baton Rouge all the way to Slidell in Louisiana. And Lettuce Media is the company that's going to produce the podcast, and they've done a lot of work for you and work for Dom and do a great job. And so we're a full content creation company in town. And then Dom's got...
Yeah, we have Love More in downtown Covington, my wife and I's yoga studio. So if you're looking to learn how to move your body, connect deeper with yourself and a community, that's available. And then Grit, Guardian Rescue Innovative Training, my coaching company that I have as well, working with executives and CEOs, doing something very similar to what Phil has to offer here. Grit.
Yeah. Thanks, Phil. It was great, man.
Thanks, man. Thanks
I
for
love
being
hearing your
here.
story and appreciate you sharing it with everybody.
Yep.
love being here. Thank you, guys.
All right, man.
That's a wrap. Huh?